And you're watching the communicators on C-SPAN. We are on location in Las Vegas at CES International 2013 at the Las Vegas Convention Center. Here's some of our interviews that we did this week. Well, now at the CES International show in Las Vegas, we're joined by Representative Zoe Lofgren, a Democrat of California.
Yes.
Representative Lofgren, what are you doing at CES?
Well, interestingly enough, this is my very first trip to CES. I've had my staff go in the past, but they asked that I come down and be on a panel about immigration, which I did this morning. And this afternoon, I'm going to look around the hall, and then I'm going to fly home to San Jose. So it's been fun so far. What
was your role on the panel, and what was your point of view?
Well, there's a lot of problems with our immigration system. And everybody sees it from the situation they're in. So the technology world sees that people who just got their PhD in electrical engineering from MIT can't get a visa to stay here even if they want to start a company here. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Of course, if you're a farmer, you see that your migrant farm workers don't have their papers and you're going to have to plow your fields under. And if you're chucking crabs in Maryland, you see that the season's going to be destroyed because you don't have workers. So the whole thing is a mess, and I have hopes that we'll have a reform effort that's really top to bottom and bipartisan.
Well, Representative Lofgren, you represent a lot of high-tech companies out in the Silicon Valley. What do you hear from them, and what do you see as the solution to the H-1B visa problem?
Well, it's not so much an H-1B problem. I'm not suggesting the H-1B program should be repealed. It does need reform. It does have structural problems that can lead to underpaying immigrants to the detriment of the American co-workers. But the real answer is in permanent residence. We're competing on a worldwide stage. And if you've got some hotshot that just got his PhD in computer science from Stanford, she's getting offers from all over the world. And to say, well, you can stay in some limbo for 6 years, it's not really competitive. So what you want to do is for people we want to have stay here, to create jobs. And that's not just in the tech field, it's throughout the economy. You need to make it easy for people to stay and create businesses and grow American jobs and help our economy recover.
What's the atmosphere, the climate for potential immigration reform in Congress and perhaps the administration?
Well, on the Democratic side, we've had an interest in immigration reform for quite some time. We have not had that enthusiasm on the Republican side. But here's the deal. In November, Mitt Romney lost badly. And part of the reason why was because he got under 30% of the vote among Asian voters and under 30% of the vote among Latino voters. And analysts have devised that that is partly because of the Republican posture on immigration. So really, the Republican leadership needs to think, do they ever want a Republican president again? Because these are the fastest growing demographic groups in the country. And if so, they have to join us and do immigration reform. We're happy to compete for voters on some other subject. Let's come together, reform this system that needs it so much. It'll be good for our country.
And this is a priority for the tech community?
It is, and it's a priority for me. It's something I've been working on for a long, long time. And it's a decision that the Republican leadership needs to make. Now, I can't make it for them. But I am hopeful that they will decide this is a good thing to put behind them. And I know that we can work together to make it so.
Representative Zoe Lofgren, what else do you hear from your constituents in the Silicon Valley area about Washington? We've heard from some people it's two different worlds.
Well, it's interesting because in the Bay Area, there aren't very many Republicans. I mean, there's not a single Republican House member from the Bay Area, and there's not a single Republican in the state Senate or the state assembly. I mean, anybody that has to identify their party is a Democrat. And that reflects the constituency, not just the elected officials. So I get when I come home, people can't understand what Republicans are doing, and I find it difficult to explain it honestly. You know, it's an area that supports freedom, that doesn't want to manage somebody else's religion or somebody else's life. It's an area that just voted to tax themselves so we could have better health care and better schools and better transportation. They look at Washington and don't understand the fight in a lot of ways.
Specifically, when it comes to technology-related issues, though, do you hear anything that your constituents would like to see Washington
there is
do?
concern about innovation and the role that current law has in the area of copyright and patent in stifling innovation. That's difficult to remedy. We had a patent bill that I actually ended up not voting for last year, having worked on it for 12 years, that really didn't do what we'd hoped it would do. We've got an overarching scheme on copyright enforcement that is probably not that positive in terms of technology innovation. I'm sure you all remember the SOPA brouhaha of last year. We stopped the overreach from the copyright maximalists, but the technology, I'm not talking the companies, I'm just talking about individuals who are inventing things and creating things, feel that there is a problem in terms of the copyright regime, and can we come together and make sure that those laws work in an internet age. That's something I'd like to work on, and I'm going to be introducing some bills. I don't know that they'll pass the first session of Congress, but at least to get the discussion going.
When you walk around here at CES, do you see a lot of your constituents?
Oh, sure. I've run into a number of people already who I know, and one of the people walking around with me said, well, do you want to go to X, Y, and Z company from your district? I said, well, I go to those companies all the time. Let's go see some companies I don't see. So this afternoon, I'm going outside the hall to another hall to visit the startups who couldn't afford to come into this hall and to see what's coming at us next.
And they couldn't afford the rent here?
So they've got the little tiny booths and the startup ideas, and a couple years from now some of them will probably be able to afford to be in this hall.
Representative Zoe Lofgren is a Democrat from California. This is the Communicators on C-SPAN.
Good to see you, Peter.
And CES International is held every year in Las Vegas. It's one of the largest trade shows in the world. About 100,000 people attend this every year. It's focused on technology. The Communicators is here doing interviews and looking at some of the new technology. Here's some more of our programming. Former Congressman Tom Davis, what are you doing out here at CES in Vegas?
Well, this is where it's a lot more productive here than in Congress in my old life, but I'm out here with Deloitte. I'm speaking at one of the conferences here and trying to enjoy the show.
What's Deloitte?
Deloitte is probably of the accounting firms and consulting firms. It's the largest, the big four in the U.S., one of the leading consulting firms, professional services firms in the country. It's a partnership.
Since you've retired from Congress, is that what you've been doing?
That's what I've been doing there. I work in the consulting practice.
What's the panel that you are headlining or speaking?
Well, I've got an issue on Congress tomorrow. I've got a couple other members, and we're going to just talk about the fiscal cliff. We're going to talk about what's happening or not happening in Washington, and try to let people understand why it's the way it is. For people who don't understand how Washington works and how voters work, sometimes we try to demystify it for them.
Tom Davis, is there a particular angle to legislative policy when it comes to tech companies, such as we're seeing out here at CES?
Well, they're conflicted because they tend to be on the social side, on the social issues side, tend more with democratic policies, on gay rights, abortion, less abortion, gun rights. It tends to be a more urbanized, affluent, educated society. But on economic policies, obviously you walk around here, very free trade. It's not a union type of operation, more market-oriented on this, and so they kind of get conflicted between the parties on this. And so the politics have been the Bay Area. Culture just is the predominant force in people's political alignment, In my area at Tyson's Corner, I had a huge tech corridor out there, a little bit different. They orient toward the government to understand those regulatory issues and the like. So I think they're conflicted like everybody else. Tech workers tended to be a little more Obama than Romney, but it's a swing vote once you get away from the social issues.
When it comes to your service in Congress, did you push tech issues at all?
Absolutely, I pushed them. I had a huge technology interest. I did a lot of legislation in that area. We had a Y2K bill when it was coming. People were afraid to touch it because of the tort liability, and afraid to make corrections because if something went wrong, even if they improved the product, they'd have a liability on it. So we put a very limited liability into place there. I was one of the co-sponsors for a bill we had on shareholder derivative suits that basically protected these companies from these lawsuits that were hitting innovative companies. You know, when you get into some of the property issues, the intellectual property issues, was active in that. Government procurement issues. Government is not a very efficient procurer of technology. Wrote the Services Acquisition Reform Act. Wrote the last cybersecurity law that goes through Congress called FISMA, Federal Information Security Management Act. I was the chief author of that. So I was a pretty prolific legislator in those areas.
Speaking of...
which tend to cross party lines.
Well, speaking of the government procurement process, does it work currently, especially when it comes to technology?
Well, the problem with government procurement is, I'll give you an example. I put in an addition on my house about a year ago. I didn't have to worry about advertising it. I didn't have to worry about small business set-asides or minority set-asides and those issues. I didn't have to worry about bid protests. And I got it done pretty efficiently, and I could work it pretty quickly. I didn't have to worry about the Buy America Act. Government procurement has all these bells and whistles on it that try to basically look at other government policies and make procurement part of that, instead of just looking at getting the cheapest goods for the cheapest price for the taxpayer. As a result of that, it's a very inefficient way to procure goods because we try to pursue too many public policy goals within that procurement system. So it doesn't. The answer is it doesn't work very well.
Is there one set of technology tools that the government uses, or does each department, agency, et cetera?
That's one of the difficulties, is the policies aren't always congruent. Agencies have their own stovepipes, and there's no interconnectivity between the government agencies. It just creates a lot of inefficiencies. In theory, the Office of Management and Budget should be overseeing these kind of issues and refereeing between the different agencies, but even within agencies, you have people procuring different systems that don't integrate very well, and as a result of that, we spend billions repairing them, billions of dollars, sometimes it doesn't repair them, and it's pretty inefficient. It's the nature of bureaucracy. The way that the people work up, build their own legacy systems, their own pride in them, and don't coordinate with anything around them. Peter, it's the same thing that in government, the incentives to save money aren't there, because if you save money, you don't get the benefit. It goes to somebody who overspent their budget somewhere else. And so the incentives in government are just, don't make it very efficient without somebody at the top coming down hard on them and saying, for the good of the order, overseeing it and making them gain these savings.
But isn't it up to Congress to make the system, to create the laws that make the system?
Well, heaven help us if you leave it to Congress. But the executive branch ought to be able to do that. The executive branch has the authority within it to do that, should it choose to do so. Now, one thing the legislative branch could give the executive branch is what's called Reorganization Authority, which every president until Reagan had it. That is, if you could reorganize the way you wanted to, you'd have to bring it to Congress for an up or down vote without amendment. Because when Congress can amend it, they get into all these jurisdictional battles, and you end up with the Department of Homeland Security. You design a thoroughbred, and you end up with a three-hump camel at the end of it. So it's the nature of government. Government does, it operates openly, transparently. The bigger your budget, the more powerful you are. In business, it's the opposite. You make a quick, fast decision. It's out of scrutiny. You make a lot of mistakes in business, but you make a lot of decisions. In government, you tend to put off those decisions because there's no reward in making them.
Tom Davis used to be chair of the Government Affairs Committee, right?
Right, government reform and oversight.
And represented also a tech area, Tyson's Corner in Virginia.
Right.
Does Congress understand technology?
Well, that's, I mean, some members, I mean, people like Darrell Issa are just hugely proficient in the area. He built up a tech company and made hundreds of millions of dollars doing it. And then you have some members that don't carry Blackberries. I mean, it's just like the population as a whole. But, you know, understanding the technology and how to use it is different than understanding its applications, understanding government policies that will encourage innovation and encourage efficiencies versus policies that discourage it. Intellectual property rights, Congress coming down one way or the other could have a huge effect in discouraging innovation. Your tax policies can encourage or discourage innovation. Our immigration policy right now, where someone comes over here and gets a PhD and we kick them out of the country and make them go to their home country to compete against us, doesn't make any sense for those of us who understand the way the world works. But it's the way things currently run. So yeah, Congress can do a lot. And you don't have to be efficient on your iPhone or BlackBerry to understand the applications of tech policy and what makes it work and what doesn't make it work.
What's your area of expertise for Deloitte?
I get a lot in the IT area, information technology. Also a lot of look, even if you have the right policy in government, making it work basically is very, very tough. You know, the implementation of that, if you will, very, very difficult. Where Deloitte excels is we take a look at what the policy is and then how do you integrate it and make it work. We're the largest merger acquisition firm in the world in terms of advisory. And we bring that source to government. So when you're trying to get efficiencies and try to accomplish the same goals with less people and fewer dollars, those are the kinds of things we excel at. But as I said before, sometimes the incentives in government are such that, why would I do that? Then I have fewer people, then my budget goes down. Or I know a company that produces this software that basically tests software much faster, 10 times faster than the government currently does it. But you don't need the people to do it. You can test it quicker and faster. But the managers say, well, what does this do to my people? How do I protect them? So government just has a different set of incentives than the private sector does because it's a monopoly. And so change comes hard.
Over the past couple of years, we've seen Google and Facebook and their Washington offices grow exponentially. We did an interview with the executive vice president of Samsung earlier here at CES, and he mentioned that they have one person in Washington. Would you recommend to a Panasonic, to a Sony, that they beef up or keep their Washington offices strong?
Well, you know, Microsoft didn't have much of a Washington office until all of a sudden the feds came after them on antitrust issues. And then you get the Justice Department going after you on something else, and then you get the SEC going on something else. Then Congress passes some law and your whole business plan's out the window, and they recognize, I mean, it's unfortunate companies need that. But the reality is today there are so many conflicting interests that somebody, if they have an advantage in Washington, will write the rules to benefit them. And that can undo your business plan. So yeah, I'd say to Sony, these companies come out of countries that don't have that kind of tradition. We're a full democracy where lobbying is embedded in the Constitution. These countries, it's a little bit different. And so they're a little late to the party on stuff. And Google learned the hard way. But Google's been very successful. Susan Molinari now heads their Washington office, doing a great job there. They've learned the hard way, though, that if you don't have that Washington presence, and the tendency of a lot of these tech firms is we don't want the government, we don't need the government, let us just innovate on our own. That's great in theory, but all of a sudden the rules change and you're out the window.
What do you miss about Congress?
Very little. I miss the foreign trips and I miss the members. I had a lot of good members, but the dysfunctionality right now, I'm a lot happier on the outside. Look, I left voluntarily. As I said, I left undefeated and unindicted, which is the way you want to leave the place. I was termed out as a committee chairman. I'd been in leadership for 2 cycles and 3 cycles as committee chairman, a ranking member, and a subcommittee chairman my other 2 years.
And you ran the National Republican
Yeah, I ran the congressional campaign successfully 2 times. That's a pretty good run. And so it's just time for me to do something else. I didn't get Potomac fever. You know, Potomac fever, when members just got to stay in Washington and they crave the only known cure for Potomac fever is embalming fluid. And I didn't have it. I was ready to do something else. I respect the people that have stayed there, trying to make the most of a difficult situation. But for me, it was just time to move on and do something else.
And this is the Communicators on C-SPAN, and we've been talking with former Republican Congressman Tom Davis. And up next on the Communicators, an interview with the CEO and Chairman of Panasonic North America. Now on your screen is Joe Taylor, who is the CEO and Chairman of Panasonic North America. Mr. Taylor, we're here in Las Vegas at CES International. What products is Panasonic debuting?
Well, Peter, first, thanks for having me. And second, I think the interesting thing about what we're doing here today is not just introducing some new consumer electronics, but really rolling out the new image of Panasonic globally. And that's a company that's almost 100 years old, that's $100 billion, and it has a portfolio of products far beyond consumer electronics.
Such as?
Well, our B2B space is really, really growing for us. We have major market shares in the avionics industry, in-flight entertainment, automotive industry far beyond speakers and radios, complete multimedia interfaces and navigation systems. We have sports and entertainment venues as well as a very large energy business. And these are things, shame on us, but we haven't made people well aware of even though we're 100 years old.
Well, Mr. Taylor, we are aware of Panasonic televisions, Panasonic cameras, things like that. You've got a brand called Your TV. What does that mean?
Your TV is the latest innovation. People want their content the way they want it, when they want it. They want to be able to communicate with each other. They want to use Twitter. They want to see YouTube. They want to shop. We're enabling that in a custom fashion on Your TV. So we use facial recognition and voice recognition. You walk into a room and you say, "My TV," and immediately the screen shows your homepage. It's really the coolest thing.
Is it on the market?
It will be on the market this spring.
4K, OLED. What do these terms mean?
So 4K is the latest innovation in terms of high resolution. 4K is really simple. It's 4 times the resolution of what you have on your HD TV at home. It's got the same qualities as digital cinemas that you've been visiting around the world. When you go see a movie, that's 4K resolution. We can bring that into your home. OLED is another technology for displays. So we had CRTs for many years. Those are the old, big old boxes, right? Then the next one was plasma, LED, LCD. The next is OLED, which is much more organic. In fact, O stands for organic LED. And it's literally paper thin, and we can bend it. It's also the most amazing thing. You have to go over to our booth and see it.
When you say organic, what do you mean by that?
We use a phosphorus rather than semiconductors as the activating agent. So it's much greener, much lower energy consumption than any display on the market.
Joe Taylor, what happened to 3D? Is 3D television successful? It was all the rage here last year.
I don't think anything happened to it. I think 3D is still developing. There's more and more content coming out all of the time. I think the biggest impediment to 3D still remains the glasses. And I think as 4K develops, I think the future for glassesless, that doesn't even sound right. 3D without glasses, how about that? I think that future becomes more imminent. And I think then you'll really see an explosion in 3D.
In your keynote here at CES International, 2 topics that you brought in, the cloud and energy efficiency. What did you talk about?
Well, the reality is they're both kind of related. The cloud allows us ways to collect, store, and analyze data in ways that we've never done before. So as it relates to energy, every device that plugs in your home can be connected to the cloud and send data. As we analyze this data, we have new ways of helping you save energy in ways that we never dreamed possible before. We can manage the entire home electrically in the most efficient way than you could have ever imagined. And we do that through the cloud. The cloud also provides many other opportunities for us. But in the end, the cloud is a big server. And all this data is coming in, and now we have ways to analyze this data in a very useful fashion.
What about apps? Does Panasonic use apps?
We don't make any apps. but we create operating systems that are open so that apps can be developed. So you mentioned Your TV earlier. The operating system for Your TV is a very open architecture, which means app developers all around the world can create apps for these TVs, similar to what's done on smartphones today.
Joe Taylor, you are the first North American CEO non-Japanese, correct?
I am.
What's it like bridging the two cultures and the business cultures as well?
I don't know if I want to answer that question. No, it's been very interesting. It's been very challenging. And I say that if Panasonic waited 50 years for me, they should have done a lot better.
I want to ask you about U.S. jobs with Panasonic. How many people are employed in the U.S.?
In North America right now, we have approximately 15,000 employees.
15,000 in
Right.
what capacities?
Well, everything from manufacturing through sales, marketing, engineering, and R&D. A complete range of jobs that you would expect in any major corporation.
When it comes to R&D expenditures, do you have a set amount or a set percentage that you put towards R&D?
We don't structure R&D that way, but it ends up to be a kind of a percentage of revenue, but it isn't budgeted that way. We look at R&D business by business, and businesses that are growing spend more in R&D, and businesses that aren't growing or that we don't anticipate to grow, perhaps we spend less. But we have 6 R&D sites in North America alone.
Is the North American market unique?
Well, we like to think it's unique. But what's unique about North America, what can't be disputed, is roughly it constitutes 25% of the world GDP. It is by far the largest market in the world. The United States itself is the only developed nation on earth whose population is still growing. So for that standpoint, it makes it a very, very interesting market. Some things in common with emerging markets, and then of course the most advanced marketplace and the most competitive marketplace in the world.
Joe Taylor, how much time do you spend on regulatory and policy issues with Washington, D.C.?
As little as I possibly can. We have a whole organization of people who are very capable of dealing with that very frustrating process. And I'm very happy to let them do their jobs and stay as distant as I possibly can.
But as North American chairman, you have to be aware.
I'm involved and I'm aware, and it's a mess, frankly. It's just a mess.
Why?
It makes it very difficult for business. So businesses can deal with anything but uncertainty. It's very difficult to make investment decisions and expect any kind of return on investment when you have no way to predict the future. And our difficulty right now is there's no consistency or certainty in our policy decisions. And in fact, I think it's become well beyond politics into ideology, and there's no compromise in ideology. So it's difficult as a business person today.
Joe Taylor, what keeps you up at night when you think 10 years down the road about what Panasonic will be, how people will be watching TV, how your products will play?
When I think about 10 years and Panasonic, I don't necessarily think about how people are watching TV. I think 10 years from now you'll see a very, very different Panasonic than what you see today. I think you'll still be watching Panasonic displays of some sort, but I think Panasonic will be much better known for non-consumer products than consumer products.
Why?
Our growth, our sustainable, profitable growth, no question in my mind, is going to come from the B2B space, from avionics, from energy, from healthcare, from these markets that we're just scratching the surface in terms of technology applications.
Will Panasonic still be manufacturing televisions?
I don't know.
Will the word television still be in use?
Probably old people like me will still be using the word television, and I think displays will still have the prominent role in the home for communicating content and information.
Joe Taylor is chairman and president of Panasonic in North America. This is The Communicators on C-SPAN. The Communicators is on location in Las Vegas at CES International 2013, the technology trade show. More programming next week.